Facebook?
Yeah, I think we were still using MySpace.
The MySpace machine.
Which is back now, apparently. That's a thing again?
Well, apparently it's for musicians. I don't know. Nobody that I know uses it for anything. But apparently it's supposed to be for folks like us.
I don't know anything about that stuff.
Yeah.
I just figured out Facebook not too long ago.
Do you know who bought MySpace?
I'm going to guess. It was either Google or... That was my answer, Google.
Yeah, no, it wasn't Google or whatever your other answer was. It was Justin Timberlake.
Really?
Justin Timberlake owns MySpace now. I don't know if he's the sole owner, but I know he's like a major holder of.
That's weird.
MySpace. That's apparently why it's a music platform now. Yeah, I remember when that was huge. And you made your page look all stupid and stuff. Like, I don't have a top 8. I have a top 16.
Right.
Of my friends. Yeah. Back in the day when, security didn't matter so much, these pages were just like, yeah, put whatever HTML you want in here and just make it look like whatever.
Yeah, I don't think I ever had like a personal MySpace page.
I did.
I think I had one for like whatever band I was in at the time.
Yeah, no, I had a personal one. I go back and I look at it every once in a while and I'm like, man, I remember all these pictures. I remember all of these, and I look through, and I don't know if I can see. I don't know if I can see any of the comments anymore, though. I kind of feel like that's a thing I don't really see. I'd be interested in seeing if there's any like private messages, just see what people may have written and what I may have written back in the day. But so that was also the day of AOL Instant Messenger. Like I remember me and all my friends used that.
Yeah. Oh wow, is MySpace that old?
Dude,
isn't AOL that's like late 90s? Yeah,
but just because of it wasn't necessarily that you were using AOL as your internet service. It was AIM, AOL Instant Messenger was just a separate. You could just download that separately, and everybody used that.
Yeah, I remember.
But yeah, that was early 2000s. That was easy for me to say.
I never used the AIM stuff. I think I was kind of using Netscape. Remember Netscape Navigator?
I remember Netscape, and that turned into Firefox.
Did it?
Yeah. Well, I don't know if it itself completely did, but I know a lot of the people went from Netscape to Firefox.
Yeah.
Yep. Back in the day when like Earthlink was like a big provider. And,
remember that Earthlink.
ISP and all that shit.
Speaking of the internet, so the first time I ever had any computer exposure in my life was after I met Heather and Heather's parents. And Heather's dad was like an IT director for Motorola.
Oh, awesome!
So he had a computer in the house that he worked on. But this was just before the internet really came along. So they didn't have the internet, but his computer had a dial-up modem, so he could dial into the library and check out books and the thing. And I thought that was the most insane thing I'd ever heard of. I can look at what the library has, not that I ever did.
Right, from my house.
Right, from the house.
I could take a look at the old Dewey Decimal System there.
Bizarre. And I remember I sat on his computer and because he had one of those Mahjong games on there, and I used to like playing that Mahjong thing.
I wouldn't even know how to play that game. I see that game
so
come
easy.
up all the time.
It's so easy, but
Mahjong. That's just the name of it is terrifying to me.
Yeah, I used to play that game on that computer, and I was fishing around on the computer one day, and I can't remember. I think it was Windows 3-ish. Maybe it might have been 95.
Wow.
To be honest,
I was gonna say Windows 3. That was late 90s.
Well, that was early 90s.
Mid to late 90s.
No, that was early 90s.
Yeah, early 90s. 95 would have literally been mid 90s.
Yeah. So, but anyway, there was this MIDI sequencer program built into Windows at that time. I think it was called Majestic or Maestro or something like that. And I looked at it, and it's laid out a lot like what Pro Tools is laid out, where you have a mixer window and an edit window. And I remember looking at that thing, and playing around with some MIDI stuff on that computer, and I thought, wouldn't it be so cool if I could actually record audio like this?
No,
I never forgot that.
Literally doing that right now.
Yeah, I never forgot that thought. In fact, just recently I was kind of digging around on the internet looking for a copy of that original MIDI software because I wanted to fool around with it again.
I'm sure that's got to be somewhere.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. I just haven't found it yet.
That would be cool to look at that because I remember my friend had a version of Fruity Loops. And we had no idea how to use it. We figured out how to get the piano roll going and like how to get like load different MIDI instruments into it.
Yeah.
But other than that, like trying to record our voices, like you remember that microphone that like every computer had, was like that white one that was like this long and it had like the bass and like
I
just sounded like shit, you know?
Yep, I know it well.
Yep. Like I remember him having that, and we could not figure out how to make that actually record, you know, anything onto. But we were able to do some stupid songs with the MIDI.
Yeah, I got into that stuff, and first time I got exposed to like actual computer recording, I graduated from high school in '97, in May, and I started at the Conservatory of Recording Arts and Sciences, like the following Monday,
Oh, wow.
and this was before like Pro Tools LE and before the 001 and Inbox and all that stuff. There was no consumer version of Pro Tools, and I had that school was pretty much an analog school at that time. We had like a Pro Tools lab, where we had
recording to tape and all that stuff.
Yeah, we had like 3 Pro Tools like workstations with the old TDM 888 interfaces, and they didn't spend any time like showing us a whole lot of stuff in Pro Tools because it was still at that point to where is this going to work or not? Everybody back then called it slow tools.
Oh no.
Yeah, because it was like rendering, like at Pixar, just take forever.
I remember hearing about that, how long it would take for all that stuff.
Yeah, so
forever.
I remember my final project for my Pro Tools class, which I think we were working on. It must have been Pro Tools 3. I think. At that time.
Jeez, man, Pro Tools 3.
And so for my final project for Pro Tools is I did dialogue replacement for a Ren and Stimpy cartoon.
Yeah, that's awesome, dude.
Yeah, and it was pretty fun. I still have that video
Please
somewhere.
be Powdered Toast Man.
No, it was Space Madness.
Yeah.
That was.
I don't remember that one. Literally all I remember from Ren and Stimpy anymore is Powdered Toast Man.
Yeah.
Log. Remember that? Log.
Yeah.
And don't piss on the electric fence.
Yeah, I remember all that stuff well. I remember my kids, have seen that. I've showed that stuff to my kids lately, and I don't know why they don't know that Ren and Stimpy stuff, but they never heard of it until like I showed it to them recently. And
that was kind of raunchy. Like, I remember that being on Nick, but that was also on MTV.
Yeah.
And I
with
just
Eon
like
Flux.
If I think about it, I'm just like, gosh, that was kind of raunchy, like TV to be like on in the middle of the day.
Right. I love the hell out of it.
Me too, man. I was a huge fan of it.
Colton, my son, he said, he goes, "You watch this crap?" And I said, "Yeah, I watched this crap. It was good."
You don't understand the 90s, my son.
Just don't get it. You just don't understand the attitude of the 90s.
Straight up, man. You got to show them like Pete and Pete and like all that stuff.
Yeah, I think
explains it all.
I had such a crush on her, man.
Melissa Joan Hart.
Melissa Joan Hart. Yeah, I thought she was going to be my girlfriend. When I. When I got past 12.
Yeah, you wanted to be homeboy that climbed up the
with the long hair and
stuff.
Yeah,
yeah, that like quintessential 90s like haircut. I remember like because I've got such curly hair, like I always wanted haircuts like that.
Yeah,
and I could never do it. It just never was ever possible because the second I would try to like, okay, my hair's growing out, it's just like.
I had that haircut.
Yeah, I could see that, and you totally have stick straight hair.
Yeah.
I could never get away with that stuff. It was just always like, okay, and here it is, Mazel Tov, like curly hair, no matter what I did.
You're like Gallagher.
I think I was quite that bad. I am working on the bald spot like Gallagher, though.
It's characteristic.
It is. That's character. Yes. I think they say distinguishing. I'm getting distinguished.
Oh my gosh! Have you seen how big Crass has gotten? The Conservatory?
Yeah, don't they have like multiple
campuses?
Multiple campuses now. I've only been there one time. I recorded there, like for somebody's project once when I was, in my mid to early 20s.
Yeah.
And I wasn't super impressed because like this poor girl, like apparently like the way it's supposed to work with whatever project she was doing is like she was supposed to be like the producer. Or at least the engineer, like the person in charge. I don't know if she was producer or engineer.
Yeah.
But like apparently like all your classmates or a bunch of your classmates are supposed to help you with like setting up microphones and setting up, making sure like the cables are set where they're supposed to be and, just because the process of recording, especially in a studio like that where you're dealing with like the big like SSL boards. I think they had an SSL board in that big room. I can't remember if it was a SSL or Neve.
Yeah, well, I think they have an SSL now.
Okay,
they did when I was there.
Okay, yeah, but it was a sizable board, and there was a lot of equipment that needed to be set up, and like it was her and one other person. Like there was supposed to be like 10 people that showed up to help her out, and like 9 of them just ditched out on her. So like we were supposed to get like 3 songs done, and we barely were able to get 1 song done.
Yeah, that's a bummer. See, when I went there, it was just the one campus, the one in Tempe, and in our A room was the Neotech, board console, and I think in our B room had the AMEC. But for my final project, I had picked out this local, just some band. I don't even know who they were. They were just a name I took off the billboard, in the office, because bands would come in and post up their info, so that people would call them for
record a demo here.
Yeah, so I picked one, and I don't know why, but they were a total no-show for like my first day of tracking.
Really? That sucks.
For my final project, and our classes were really small. Like I think I had 4 people in my class.
Yeah.
So I ended up just doing my final project myself. Like
really?
Which
that's kind of cool.
They didn't like that idea of doing it. They actually said it up front, like, we know that a lot of you guys are musicians and players and stuff, but don't use this as an opportunity to record your own stuff. You're here to learn how to be an engineer.
Why?
Because that's what it is. You're there to learn how to record, not to play. But I had no
But that's absolutely what everybody does nowadays.
Yeah, but that's not what it was. And I'll tell you something funny about that. Let me finish this real quick. So
okay,
I did my own project, which was absolutely terrible, but I got a passing grade.
Mm-hmm.
But I had to play all the stuff, and then I did it so my professor didn't know that it was me, because I didn't want him to think that like I flaked out on having a band or whatever when they flaked out on me. But speaking of that, about what we were talking about just before that, see, I always saw that it was going to come to that point where everybody was going to be recording in their bedroom, and everybody was going to have a 48-track studio at the end of their bed or whatever. And my final written paper that I did was, we were supposed to do this thing where we talked about where we were going to be in 20 years and our ideas on the future of the recording industry and stuff. And I wrote my whole paper on the big studios disappearing and everybody having Pro Tools on a laptop, and which was an insane thing to think of in 1997 or 1998. And everybody laughed at me. They giggled at me when I told them, I said, there's no way that I'm going to get a job at a big studio coming out of the Conservatory, because the market is so flooded right now. And then starting right now, everything's diminishing. It's gone.
Yeah.
All the big boys are going down. They still will be. Several will be around because,
Yeah, but you hear
because of the vintage gear.
You hear all of them. You hear every year more and more of them going down, though.
Yeah.
Still.
But back in those days, most of the market was project studios where people were recording on ADAT and Soundtech, consoles and stuff, and that's where most people got jobs at coming out of the Conservatory, was project studios like that. And so I did my paper on this. I'm just going to learn how to do this on my own. I came to the school because I wanted to learn the proper process of signal flow, so I could, because I don't see myself ever getting a job, and there's not going to be any opportunity for it. I just want to be able to record at home, because I think that's where the future is, recording at home. And
right.
Everybody in my class was like,
"This Donny
really?
guy, this is what a dunce."
And I'm not going to say I saw it, but it's true though. 20 years later, here we are, and everybody, you listen to the radio, and half the people that are on the radio have never been in a big studio.
No, most of these guys, or a lot of these guys, are just doing it in their bedroom, or kind of like what we're doing, have a space all set up for it.
Most of the stuff that you hear on the radio, came off somebody's laptop.
Absolutely. Isn't that crazy too? All the stuff that you watch, and all this, some of the web pages you go to that say how you have to do it right.
Yeah.
It's just you need to have the perfect like sound paneling and just like make sure that you don't have like ridiculous high end like bouncing off the walls and stuff like that, which to some extent is true.
That is true,
but to some extent it doesn't really fucking matter because as long as you're making something that sounds good.
Yeah, and that's a thing. But if you were to listen, this is going to be a weird discussion because it's I don't know, it's controversial, but there's a lot of quality that has been lost.
Oh, I believe that.
And not just in the recording process and the production, but like in the art of writing. Period. The whole art has been very cheapened. In a lot of ways, recording and performing. And I don't know. It's I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing. But that is the thing.
I would have to agree. Like the old way, and when I say the old way, which necessarily wasn't the bad way, it was a really good way. And a lot of that stuff sounds. I mean, you definitely know when you're listening to a recording from the 50s, and you could just hear like they use like maybe 4 mics to record the whole band kind of thing,
Yeah.
And then going up to the 70s and especially in the 80s when they really started adding the mics in there and starting to get the effects and all that and like just having these multi-million-dollar studios.
Yeah.
Into the 90s, right? And now like we're talking about is just like anybody can get these computers and these interfaces to work on and get these music going on. But it's almost like that's part of the evolution of it is like, like that's part of the creativity is making the room that you're in, even if it's not the perfect situation,
to
make it, kind of work with your music a little bit.
Yeah. So problem is like, when you're used to, hearing something the same way all the time, you don't know the difference. Like you don't know like what recording in a bathroom is going to do to the way it sounds. Like that's why, when it comes down to like people having trouble mixing their music at the end, like they can't get everything to sit right. Well, there's a reason for that. It's because, what doesn't sound like echo, ends up being like, you can hear that stuff in the mix, and
absolutely.
But you don't know that you're hearing it because you're so used to hearing it every day.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and that's I think that's a huge thing for like for me when I was learning how to do it. Because I haven't been doing this nearly as long as you have, but when I started doing it, like I remember you gave me like your old 002 rack and stuff to mess around with, and it just sounded like shit because I didn't know about, polarity, I didn't know about, making sure that everything was in phase as far as multiple mics go.
Yeah.
So I sent you a recording back and it's just like, gosh, what did I do? But, I feel like nowadays, like I'm definitely a lot farther than I was back then. And the whole reason that I'm even able to do anything now is just because I was experimenting. And that seems like, it would just, even with the old school stuff, was just experimenting, like all those guys were just experimenting. I mean, they'd figure out something that sounded really good and then they'd do it forever, but like all those guys were like tricking, messing around with different tricks.
Yeah, well, that's exactly right.
So it's like it seems like the apprenticeship has kind of gone away, and I think that's kind of what you're kind of alluding to there when you're like, people just don't know how to do it because they don't necessarily have the same guidance.
Yeah.
But what's different about that too is that we have YouTube.
Yeah, but there's a difference though, because anybody like us right now can sit down and like have a YouTube video. And when you see people doing these instructional things on YouTube, they're presented awesomely. They all look great. It's all very professional looking, but it doesn't. How do I say this without offending anybody? Anybody can make it. It's like writing in Wikipedia. Anybody can write anything they want in Wikipedia, and then somebody's going to read it and they're going to think that's the truth when maybe it's not accurate.
Absolutely, but I think that's also part of the experimentation part of that. Yeah, because there's been a bunch of videos that I watch, and the guy's like, "Hey, you should try this thing out. It'll sound really cool." Then I go and I do it, and I'm like, "That sounds like dog shit. I don't know why I listened to that person." Yeah. Well, so then I knew not to do that ever again, and then I'm like, "But if I did it this way, it sounded a lot better."
Yeah. One thing I can remember Andy Segal always telling me was that there's no right way and there's no wrong way for any of it. It's all experimental anyway.
Yeah, exactly. But that's.
But as far as
but you had somebody telling you that. Is my point. That's what I'm saying, and that's kind of like like the apprenticeship is kind of switched from being like with one person and being like getting their view on it, and as opposed to just getting like an iPad or something and watching some YouTube and being like, oh, that guy's got some cool stuff. Oh, that guy's got some really cool stuff. But on top of that, you're getting to deal with like some of the dudes that are like the tip top of the food chain and the whole giddy up here as far as music goes, which that wasn't available back in the day unless you somehow did get some kind of apprenticeship or internship at some of these bigger studios.
Yeah, I'm very thankful that I got to hang out with some cool guys like that.
I believe it.
Get yelled at,
Yeah, you were the coffee guy for a while too, weren't you?
Coffee guy for a long time.